That's the YouTube. This should be good now. So. Yeah.
What? But check the WhatsApp.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you so much for having me here today. My dad was told me that showing up is a works, and that's actually about you feel very distinct. You'll be inspired to see the world a little bit outer layer of the earth. So for us, we are an extension of the earth, and the health of the earth is the health of us. The health of the soil is the health of our skin. And when you see things as so interconnected, it is baffling how much soil degradation and ecosystem destruction is actually reflected on how we are doing as a species, as humans. So that is just one of the principles that guide my work, not only into climate, but
everything that is interconnected to make the Mother Earth safe and livable for us and for all of the other beings on Earth. Uh, a week and a half ago, before coming to Germany, I was in Brazil. I was in a community called Alto Rio Guama, and I met with them in the state of Pará, which is where COP30 will be taking place. The COP of biodiversity. We're kind of trying to frame it in that sense. And as I got to Belém and I was driving through, it was 5 hours of driving from Belém to the territory, the indigenous territory. And every single plot of land next to me that used to be a rainforest was degraded land. And there was so much cattle, there was so much just like soybean plantations, and a lot of it was actually abandoned as well. 20% of the Amazon rainforest is deforested. And the Amazon rainforest could actually survive getting to 2 degrees of warming, but only if there is no land destruction and land degradation. And this is because it could get up to a tipping point where the Amazon rainforest could actually lose its moisture and go to an ecosystem that is more dry, which would be devastating for the communities living there as well as for our global climate system. And talking to the communities in Brazil, which by the way gifted me these beautiful earrings. They wait for the feathers of the birds to fall, and then through courses of months and even years, they start crafting this beautiful jewelry. And talking to the communities, what they really want is for it to be allowed for them to defend their territory and to bring their land back to life. And we have so many conceptions in this type of conferences where I am now in Germany about how we need to restore land, and a lot of it is the fault of the Western world and how much we are consuming and how much actually is thrown away and all of the waste that we have. But the deep knowledge on how to live in harmony with Mother Earth, that a millenary knowledge comes from indigenous communities. And you will see in the documentary that a lot of the practices that are used is to live in harmony with Mother Earth, to go back to ways of doing agriculture that are not extractive and are not monoculture and are not just trying to take things from the land but nourish the land. And that is an indigenous principle. And so that is why we cannot have a system of restoration that doesn't include that type of different mindset and shift of mindset with the land. So I'm saying all of this because it was a gift to go to Brazil. It was a gift to share space with the indigenous communities there, which are very different from my community in Mexico. But the through line is the same. In order to have better land management systems, in order to confront the climate crisis, what we need is that shift of mindset that we are extensions of the earth. The last thing I will say is I am not the expert as all of the other ones that you're going to meet in this panel, but I am part of a generation that wants to see a systemic shift in the way in which we relate to Mother Earth, not only in the way that we eat and consume, but also in the way that we walk. There is this very popular saying that says, walk on Earth like she feels pain, and that is supposed to make us feel like we have a responsibility. But I would say we need to walk on Earth like she feels love. And every time we walk on Earth, remembering that we are connected, that we are that extension of the Earth. So with that, I will leave it to the panel to start and for Omnia to take it away. But just to reiterate, we are here in the climate conferences, there's biodiversity conferences, there's the certification conferences, and we should be talking about all of these topics together because they are interconnected. So that is the work that I'm doing here. I'm fighting really hard for the interest of indigenous peoples and the interest of youth to be in these halls of negotiations, and we will not stop standing up because it has been decades of negotiations and we need to turn things around. There is a concept called the planetary boundaries, which we have surpassed 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries, including things like emissions and ocean acidification and pathogens. And I think that future generations should have the right to be born within the limits of the planetary boundaries. We should have the right to be born on a stable planet. And that is the path that we're going towards. So thank you so much for listening. I'm excited for you to see the screening. And from wherever you are in the world, you have such a big role to play on the restoration of our soils and our ecosystems. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shi, for all that you're doing. And we are supporting you for the incredible work that you're leading in Bonn and in your work with Indigenous communities, but also with young people. And there's so much that you said that I can relate to, and I completely love how you emphasized our right to live within the planetary boundaries, our right to health, but also the right of the lands to be protected, preserved, and centered by Indigenous communities and by all the policymakers to understand that and center that view. So thank you again. Now I'm going to invite the broader panel to come in, and I hope you feel as inspired as I am by Shia's keynote. So I'm going to introduce, first of all, Kartik Verma. He is a representative from the Children and Youth Major Group and an activist for child rights and environmental issues. Kartik also serves as a UNICEF Youth Advocate for India. Thank you for joining us. Next, we have Mr. Bruno Puzzi. He is UNEP's Deputy Director of the Ecosystems Division with over 20 years of experience, of international relations, diplomacy, and politics, and has worked across three different components in the range of political, environmental, and economic roles. Very excited to have you with us, to have the policymaker in the room. We have also Ayadi Mishra, who serves as the chairperson of the We Are Tomorrow Global Partnership. Ayadi is an architect, works towards inclusion and climate justice as an activist, and also a UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration Advisory Board member. And last but definitely not least, and this is why we have this event today. So, Finian Makepeace, he is the co-founder and chief strategy officer of Kiss the Ground, the film we will all watch later. And he is a renowned presenter, media creator, and thought leader in the field of regenerative agriculture and soil health. Thank you all for being here, and I have a couple of questions for all of you, but please feel free to, if there's something that the other panelists said, feel free to jump and let us know. But I will start with Kartik, and I would love to hear from your perspective and from your work, as she has said, as a younger generation, why is land restoration important, and what is your relationship to land?
Hello,
Hi, we can hear you.
thank you. Hello, everyone. A very good evening from Nepal. As the previous speaker mentioned, that there's a lot of discussion going here and there around climate, around biodiversity, around land degradation. As the same, I'm also here in Nepal, from like coming from India, uh, to discuss few core issues of South Asia. But again, as you mentioned, coming back to question that what relation I hold. Uh, so coming from a rural village background and the agriculture family, me as a child, when we were born, we used to play in soil. So here, like the theme proposed that let's kiss the ground. But what I remember is like let's get our hand dirty into the soil, right? So the entire childhood we have developed our a cultural relation with the soil, and also coming like to the agriculture relation, we hold a significant importance that how soil give us back, because our financial condition is dependent on the health of the soil. So there is a cultural bond, and to the same why the first line that why it is important. So this itself signifies that it is not merely a soil, it's not merely a land, but it's more beyond that. It's also about the microorganism which is present in soil. It is also about biodiversity. it is also about climate, it is also about ecosystem, it is also about finance, sustainable agriculture. So there's a lot of reasons why it is important to restore the land, why it is important to reflect back that what we have been doing to the soil. But again, and the like last thing why it is important is also cultural significance, because reflecting back to the centuries ago where things were good, our ancestors were taking care of soil. Why? Because there was a huge bond with the soil. They coexist together. They knows the importance of the soil. But in current era, we can say on the name of modernization, we can say on the name of development, we have lost our connection with the soil. We have lost the connection with the land. We don't want dust to get on our hand. I think that's what holds a very significant value, to reflect back and come like when I got to know about this entire film screening and the topic, which is like kiss the land. So it's really important to reflect back and reconnect with the soil, reconnect with the land, and there's like way beyond. So the problem itself significantly states that why it is important to restore, why it is
Sorry, Kartik, I think we lost you. Or is it me?
Am I audible?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, you
Yeah.
can go now.
Yeah, I don't know where I missed, but the point which I was raising, that to reflect back, that me having a very personal relation, a cultural significance with the soil, we all as a community need to reflect back that what values we bring from the land, to get rooted to the soil, to conserve that. So, of course, there is a long story, but yes, this is why it is important to restore the land.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And thank you for really and clearly explaining to us our cultural relation to the soil and how it gives us back, how our health is dependent on it, and at the same time, how it links with all aspects relating to our determinants, whether it is climate, biodiversity, the very microorganisms that we rely on. So, thank you for that. And now I'm going to go to Finian to build on that as one of the filmmakers. What makes you what made you choose to make a film about this and to continue working on this specific topic? I'm sorry, you're mute.
Thank you so much, and I want to thank everyone for putting this event on and choosing Kiss the Ground as the film today for tomorrow, World Environment Day. I would say more that this chose me and us at Kiss the Ground. I had, in my late 20s and my whole life, really always been an activist, an environmentalist. I was a go-to know-it-all for many of my friends on what was happening with climate, with drought, with biodiversity, etc. And when I connected to this idea, watching a 4-hour presentation from a gentleman named Graham Sate, it was truly earth changing for me, because everything else up until that point had been, how do we go off the cliff slower? All of the other climate solutions and solutions we were looking at were just, how do we do a little less harm? And so when I learned in a 4-hour lecture about the power of humanity working to rebuild soil faster than we ever thought possible, it really seemed too good to be true. And it really had, as was just stated, so many amazing solutions tied to it. We weren't just talking about carbon sequestration. We were talking about human health. We were talking about water. We're talking about the very ability to bring back and replenish fresh water supplies. We're talking about biodiversity, being able to come back and spring back at paces in my concept before that weren't even possible. And we're talking about just incredible amounts of fertility to be able to be brought back, so farmers and livelihoods, economics could really come back to communities that are just so impoverished and hurt right now. So sovereignty of water and food. So these incredible benefits. And if I said, if this is all true, we have to dedicate our lives to getting the word out. And myself and the other co-founder, Ryland, we shook hands and we said, we will. We don't know what we're going to do. We didn't know we were going to become a nonprofit. We didn't know we were going to help make the film. But that was the beginning of it. It was just, we have to. This is such a big idea. And it just so happened that the house that the other co-founder, Ryland, was living at was the same house that Josh and Rebecca, the directors of Kiss the Ground, had just moved out of. And over a few months, we convinced them to start this project of making this film that you're going to see today. They didn't know, they used to make films about oil, and they were like, what, soil? This doesn't make sense. So we worked with them and we helped produce this movie with them, bringing a lot of who you see on the camera to the picture. And it was an incredible process. It took almost 8 years to complete this film, but we think it was well worth it. And really the core of it was, what if we could have the thing that happened to us, this big aha moment, what if it could happen to more people? And that's why this film was made, was that we believed that if it happened to us, if it changed our perspective on what's possible, to see a future of regeneration, to believe that we can do this, if that happened to us, what if it could happen to so many other people? And it turned out it hadn't yet. As I mentioned many times, like, this is almost 12 years ago, Al Gore wasn't talking about this at this time. There was just so many people in the climate space who weren't yet talking about soil. And so we said, well, we didn't know, so probably most people in the world don't know. And that's really what the foundation of Kiss the Ground, the organization, was saying we have to be able to tell the story. So we are a big media creator in regenerative ag and soil health, and we also have to educate. So we became an education nonprofit that helps people learn more and go deeper with all of our online courses and materials. And then we also help farmers directly, getting farmers to be able to convert and get trained in this topic. So it's been a complete takeover of my life, honestly. I didn't know it was going to happen. I didn't know I was going to become a soil guy for the rest of my life, but it's just so incredible. And the thing I hope people get from this movie is that this is a perspective, it's a mindset, as was mentioned earlier, that Shea was saying. We have to switch how we think. We are stuck in a sustainability paradigm. We're trying to conserve what little we have left, and that's well and good. But to see and believe and understand the possibility of regeneration, that's when everything changes. And I've seen it happen with farmers and ranchers and watched the extremely fast transformations. I've watched it happen with whole communities in India. They've taken millions of acres and restored the watersheds. People can do this. We can work with the land and very rapidly regenerate it so it functions again, get our water back, and completely transform deserts back into grassland. So all over the world, regeneration is possible, and that's what we're standing behind.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And it's so unique and so important how we always tend to see all the different when we talk about climate change and environmental degradation and land degradation. We always see how the impacts are accelerating, but it's so incredible that you are leading this entire movement towards solutions and towards bringing back the soil, but also the health of the people who are most affected by such degradation. So I'm even more excited for Kiss the Ground. And I would like to now move on to Bruno. And I'm very curious to know, as the UNEP has an entire division dedicated to ecosystems. So from your perspective and your leadership, why is land restoration so important? And what is the role of land restoration in UNEP's work?
Is he muted?
Yeah. Can you try again? We can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Is it better?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Wonderful. Apologies for that. Technology failing at the worst one. I was saying very inspiring words we just heard from our two previous speakers, and I build on this. We've heard that we've lost our connection with the soil, and I think this is what ecosystems division is trying to bring back. Not only with the soil, with nature as a whole. And we've got in our work the leading sentence that we use is that we give nature a voice at the table, because it's what nature has lost. We are developing our economy, we're doing our social development, we're thinking about our culture, but the link with nature and how we are so much part of nature is something that we've lost. So we're trying to bring it back. We're trying to bring it back through restoration effort, conservation efforts, but also by promoting economic transformation, a different way of doing our development, and doing it for the people. It's not an abstract. It's not one against the other. No, it's one with the other. That's really what we try to push. So we provide policy advice, technical support. We inform on what kind of investment can be done in favor of biodiversity using nature-based solution for land, for ocean, for fresh water, and this to build stronger communities, better resilience, because we're facing a triple planetary crisis. So it's not a scenario as business as usual at all. Actually, we need to do that because we will face this crisis and these three crises of pollution, biodiversity loss, and climate change, while we do every effort to reverse them and bring back a better scenario. These crises will be there for the next century or so. So it's an intergenerational fight as well, and it's a rights-based fight. So this is what is motivating us. That's why we've got a World Division, which is the largest of UNEP. UNEP is not a very big organization, but still, being the leading voice of the environment in the UN system, we hope we can influence things. And we do that through normative work, through science, bringing the evidence that there are problems, but there are solutions. And that's what we want to build, this message of hope. I think that we will see as well in this movie and in every panelist here, that we can do things to promote sustainable land management practices around the world. And for example, we are assisting around 100 countries to take steps and measures to combat degradation of the soil, to combat desertification, and get that in their national program of action. And this is very often by supporting local governance. So there's this link between communities, soil, nature is very important. Getting at the lowest level of political decision making, this connection done, enables us to bring this movement to the scale and move it forward. We also work on food system and sustainable agriculture. Agriculture, as it is practiced today, is the biggest driver of soil degradation. And so more needs to be done with the agricultural sector to focus on soil health as the foundation of land restoration. Healthy soils will build resilience for the communities, will build resilience to adapt to climate change, increase productivity. So it's a good investment. And it is an investment where we talking with the financial sector to say, hey, change your lens, look at it differently, because this is really something that will pay back in a different way, but in a sustainable way and in the long-term way. And we're trying to demonstrate that with our partners from FAO through the UN Decade of Ecosystems Restoration, which is a movement. And this is part of this, in my sense, this meeting today is part of this movement to showcase that if we unite the world, we can prevent, stop, and even reverse the degradation of ecosystems worldwide. So our aim is to go with private sector, with governments, with civil society to restore 1 billion hectares. And we've identified a number of flagships that demonstrate that it is feasible, it can be brought to scale. And we really hope that we all in this room, in Nairobi, in the virtual room, will all be actors of restoration as well. So thanks.
Thank you, Bruno, and thank you for also emphasizing the intergenerational equity perspective within the work that you are leading. but also looking beyond towards agriculture and sustainable food systems, which is also one of the biggest drivers, as you said, of soil degradation that we need to consider, but also an opportunity to improve both soil health and human health. So thank you again. Now I'm going to move to our last panelist. And Ayadi, I'd like to know from you, why do you think, from your perspective, this particular topic is less talked about, especially when we tend to talk more about climate change and other issues? And yet, how can we raise the profile of land restoration and healthy soil within and outside the global climate debate and movement?
Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you so much. Again, to set the context, I am also in a small huddle space here in Bonn, where we're again together advocating for children's rights and youth rights. I think this is again just showing the kind of advocacy young people come here together to do, but also shows that, for example, I follow the nature and biodiversity thematics, but there is no specific space here, for example, in the climate space. So we go towards adaptation and all these other different thematics which can quantify, which can say that, yes, this is where you fit in. I think this has always been the problem with, for example, or our solutions of ecosystem restoration, about, again, working with land, working with communities, because the climate space has always, usually, because of our economic system, because of the system that we live in, has looked at it towards a way of quantification, to a way of measuring. And that's where intangible things, for example, communities, what we talked about, for example, what Zia and Karthik mentioned, were, again, relations towards this land, towards your community, cannot be quantified. Similarly to what Finian is talking about, as well as what Bruno really mentioned on about our flagships, was exactly this, that you cannot call yourselves as something else. We're all part of nature. In the end, human being is nature, but we've always seen this being advocated for, that nature needs a seat when essentially you are it. And I think this is what I take on from a lot of indigenous communities, a lot of local people and vulnerable communities that we also work with, where we've had amazing workshops, for example, even with the UN Decade, especially the Youth Task Force, where we've talked about what the meaning of adaptation is. But adaptation is not just what is defined currently in the text, but also means the ability of nature as well as people. How much can that system take? And this again advocates exactly for the systemic change that was requested by all of the panelists over here. And I'm sure this is also what we'll see again in the movie. For example, again, for loss and damage, you cannot quantify what loss is, what damage is, because it's irreparable to all the communities that actually go through it. And again, I just want to really highlight the reason that I again work with the UN Decade, what we again advocate for, is that our work is where our mouth is. So working with, again, FAO really closely with, again, the different kinds of task forces, especially the challenges of the Youth Task Force, where we have about 5 different projects going on. This again leads to the current heat waves going on in India, where we're really trying to work with the farming communities, also focusing on the kind of monsoons that we are having. Again, the world is flooding, other half is again having droughts. So appropriating different kinds of solutions from different parts of the world, because the local people, the indigenous communities, the land, the people who have been here for the longest, they know how to live there. They know how to deal with the wrath of nature. But some things that you cannot account for is the havoc by everything outside. I think this is what I want to talk about for now.
Yeah, thank you, Ayadi, and I completely agree. And something I came across recently when we talk about costs, and in Bonn, everyone now is talking about the finance goal. There are certain costs, not just monetary costs, but also cultural costs, the cost of losing land, losing our identity, and the nature that is part of us. This is something that we cannot quantify, and yet the most vulnerable and marginalized communities are shouldering these costs on their own health, culture, and their land. So thank you also for all the work that you're doing in Bonn and in your activism and leadership. So I'm going to go back to Karthik. I hope you're still with us, yes? And you shared with us around soil health and what it means to you, as well as the cultural relations that we have with the soil, with the land. From the work that you're doing, how can we work on that? How do we do that for land restoration, but also your thoughts around how to involve policymakers in the work that we do.
Yeah. So, like, just to quickly reflect on the note, I totally agree with the point of Ayadi that what we are going to measure, like we are talking about restoration, that are we going to measure that what loss we have suffered due to this? Until unless we are not like we are, if we are not, we cannot measure it. How we can act on it? So that's some reasoning given to keep this out of the agenda, to keep it out of the box. So it also identity crisis that where we best fit in. But talking more specifically that why it is important. So there is like a quote that we are what we eat, and what we eat comes from soil, and soil have chemicals. So I think that's all one line which states that why it is important to uphold that it's not only about land, it is not only about soil. Again, as previously mentioned, it is also about microorganism which have their presence in the soil. It's also on other like part of nature which coexist together, and it is also because we are also part of this nature, we also coexist together. We cannot go beyond. So a health of soil is like directly correlated with the health of human. So because we like specifically talks that how it relates with us, until and unless it is not impacting us, we are not going to talk about it. So I think that is still lagging into the general audience, because speaking very common ground within the India, because within my village we face a lot of issues. We use chemicals, pesticides, and lot of things in the agriculture field, but we don't know that what problem we are incurring in an indirect way. So there is a very less knowledge. And if I know that okay, this is killing us, this is killing us indirectly, so we don't know that what is the best alternative we have. So restoration is all about solution. So coming to the second part of the same question, that how policymakers could be involved. So I think being an important stakeholder into the entire discussion, because they are the big players. So engaging with people who are working on solution, engaging with young people, involving them while making the policies, hearing people's opinion who are working on the ground, that what is the ice breaking idea they have, or what is the indigenous practice they have been taking forward. So engaging policymakers could be at this discourse as well, where young people, experts, professionals are also talking that this is the thing which holds the importance. This is the thing that our generation will bear. And this is the thing we cannot afford at any cost. So this discourse also create a lot of influence while uh, that 1 degree shift while making the policies. So there are a lot of ways, but like reflecting back that soil's health correlate with the human health, and that's something which not only I am saying, but a lot of professionals, everyone is saying the same. Until and unless we are not presenting this idea to the general people, that it is not about soil, it is about you. When people correlate with the problem, they start acting on this, that it's about us. So I think that is one thing why this answer why comes into the picture. And also this significantly says that why policymaker and where policymaker can engage with different stakeholders, either civil society, either young people, either professionals, either filmmakers. There could be different ways, but this why and where, it's like it's come into the picture. It's nowhere into the space. It is on the ground. It is in the soil. So yeah, I think that's what bring much sense to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kartik. And I completely agree in terms of having that integration with, especially when we're talking about policymakers, that it is not only about the health of the soil and the land, it's also about the health of the people. And they have the right and the responsibility to respond to the impacts of climate and degradation on people's health and the communities that they serve, and also about co-creation and working together, creating more research and awareness, but also understanding the science and basing the science and the solutions on the science, but also the experiences and the indigenous wisdom that many of the communities already have. So it's also very important to have that sense of co-ownership, co-creation with the communities for the land that they have been protecting for so many years. Now I'm going to move on to Finian, and I have your hands raised up, but also a very interesting question, which is around a surprising fact about soil and land restoration. And I know you cannot say too much because we're going to see the movie, but we would love to know that in the sense of what you learned in your journey of making the movie. You're mute again.
Again, first, just wanted to quickly mention for policymakers out there, we have to remember that most of them don't know either. I just say that straight and very specifically. We're thinking and anticipating that policymakers somehow know this and are just not acting on it. They don't know. I mean, what I mean by that is they don't understand that the land that they see out their door or flying on a plane or driving in a car is broken, that when it rains, it doesn't work. An inch of rain takes an hour to infiltrate. They don't know that in 2 years, a farmer or rancher or someone could transform that land so that a 2-inch rain event would all seep into the soil, saving 27,000 gallons right into the farmer's land and recharging our aquifers and our streams. They don't know functioning soil. They don't understand it. So when they're grabbing at straws, trying to look at climate solutions, they don't take seriously the soil as a solution because they don't understand it. So all of us have to start with that, is they don't know, and then start to talk with everyone, no matter how high level they are, and say, you got to get this. I want you to really get it. One thing that we had with this movie, the Secretary of Agriculture in the United States credited us showing him this movie personally, and then connecting him with leaders and experts in this work. He said, this is the reason I care about soil health this time as the Secretary of Agriculture. He was the secretary before, and then he had a second term. So it does work when you give people an opportunity to actually understand the fundamentals of how soil functions and how it can transform entire ecosystems, entire watersheds, and really stop playing as fringe. I think as a movement, we all have to step up and say, no, this is the most important solution, period. We have to start claiming the space, because when it comes to the livelihoods of people everywhere, it is going to be the land working or the land not working. That's going to be the difference. And I think we're not looking at that much as we need to. To answer your question, sorry about that, but the biggest thing for me, I started with, oh my God, soil's a carbon sink. That's how I started, perfectly honestly. What I realized in the course of several months after that, diving deeply into the research, was the understanding that regeneration is compounding, meaning that when you have a square meter of soil that all of a sudden has some poop on it, or has some kind of fertility get started because you did a cover crop, it's compounding, meaning all of a sudden life feels the conditions, the new conditions, and starts to activate. So plants that were dormant seeds come out of the ground. You have a latent seed bank that all of a sudden says, I can come up. Or the exudates that you're pumping into the ground from your cover crop. Those are carbon liquid sugars. All of a sudden the microbes say, oh, we're alive again, we're coming back. Those microbes allow the plant to access more minerals and nutrients. The plants can go bigger, more diverse species can come back because the conditions change in the soil and the plants say, I can come back. All of a sudden, it starts raining more on that land because there's less heat island and there's more aerosols going up. And all of a sudden, more water goes into the soil. Then there's more microbes fed, and the microbes get more nutrients to the plants. The plants can pump more carbon into the ground. What I'm talking about is a positive feedback loop of regeneration starts. And if we are managing for regeneration versus sustainability or conservation, all of a sudden everything transforms. We say we can keep these, and this is what a lot of indigenous cultures know and knew, is that humans can be this critical steward of the land versus a complete destroyer, taker, extractor of the land. We can actually be the managers who see that. That's what I appreciate about so many indigenous cultures, is they know the mindset of, they've made mistakes in their place, in their place of the world. They've made the mistakes, they've learned, and then their cultures have said, no, we can be stewards. We don't have to be extractors and takers. And I think that's a big part of the shift. So one fact that I learned is regeneration can be compounding and happen very, very, very quickly.
Yeah, thank you so much. And also, I really loved how you were sharing around policymakers, because sometimes we assume that they have the knowledge, but they're choosing not to do anything about it, when it's actually around building that evidence base, that knowledge that they can uptake and design policies that respond to it, but also help implement these solutions, fund these solutions. And the same goes also for donors and other stakeholders in the policymaking space. Do you want to add something? Sorry, you're muted again.
At kisstheground.com, we train people anywhere. We have trained 5,000 advocates from 30 different countries on how to be an advocate. I go to DC all the time. I'll be in DC next week. We train people how to be advocates for soil. So encouraging folks to take the step, go to soil advocate training at kisstheground.com, and you can become a qualified advocate for this work. No problem.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I myself will check this out and see how I can be an advocate, because it's such incredible work, and thank you for all that you do. Ayadi, I'm going to go back to you, and just would love to hear, we've been talking about what we can do with policymakers. We've also been learning how it's just incredible, that virtuous cycle of prioritizing soil health and how it pays back to all these different cascades of incredible benefits, both for the land, but also for us and for our health and for our food systems. And from your perspective, what are the concrete steps that we can take to restore our lands, to be the advocates Finian is now leading to? And yeah, the floor is over to you.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think that's quite a heavy question, but what comes to mind is, for example, what has been happening probably an hour ago in the discussion for the NAPs, again, for the adaptation policies by countries, where again, what even country delegations have been highlighting was the access to, for example, the technology transfer, the kind of access and capacity building they themselves have as actors have. And also finally, what all of this comes down to is, where there is money, that's where the honey is. This has been basically what we have been following. And I've also seen this in multiple chants and the environmental movement, that if you don't fund conservation, you're just doing gardening. If you don't fund for all these activities, you're essentially, again, talking about, yes, this should happen, but in the end, it does not. And I think what comes to mind again is the statements by AOSIS, Fiji, Zambia, India as well, that talk about the need for a change in the way we think. So again, focusing on the systemic change that has been needing, on the way we see each of us as part of nature, the way we see the actions that are required to, again, work for the said restoration, and the way it can be communicated. For example, a good example that comes to mind is the journal that we've been working for, the Climate Minds Journal, which was, again, a collaboration by the YCC, where, for example, our entry was focused more on soil. So I think that's pretty much very appropriate in this space, where we wanted people to think about your food, where does it come from, and the actions needed by things as small as ants, rodents, pollinators. And again, what even the impact of feeding a monkey on the street is when you're removing them as pollinators that are again on the trees, and the kind of again relationship that you have with nature. So I really think that it starts first with rethinking the way you see nature, the way it's always very anthropocentric, where we always appropriate from weeds to farming to different kinds of crops, etc., as human being in the center, and also towards going more towards policy now, as well as actions on ground. A very good example, again, is the coalition that we work with. This is the We Are Tomorrow Global Partnership, which is, again, essentially a group of, currently we are 17 partner states. So these are, again, youth movements that we're trying to strengthen with the help of course, the Dutch MFA, which, again, helps us connect these ODA countries with their donors. So this is a large partnership where we work with, again, countries and youth movements that need strengthening through their government. And once the government is on board, once your municipality is on board, the young people and their voices is much stronger, because again, acting on the ground, acting together with local communities, getting whatever we are talking about is always relating to access, because you have a lot of experts in their own rights in their local communities, as well as the indigenous right holders who are again protecting the land. And this is also what the UN Decade talks about, for example, with our, again, Terai Arc or the Mediterranean flagships, that we talk about that people are supposed to be inside their land. They need access to their land. They need those forest rights, those land rights. And I think all of this comes together in finding out different ways of working together with all the stakeholders that we've been talking about, be it private actors, government actors, young people, the indigenous. It just all really needs to come together. That's my 2 cents.
And these are so important. Thank you, Adi, for also giving us a little bit of insight of what's happening in Bonn right now. And as you said, one of the things you really emphasized is the role of bringing civil society, of bringing communities in the work that we are doing. And we cannot do it without their voice and them as partners in the solutions that we are developing, but also thinking about the necessary funding in order to support their engagement and actually doing the work that needs to be done. So my last question, and I invite the audience to please send us any questions you have on the chat from all the great interventions and insights we've heard until we hear from Bruno, and then we're going to move to the Q&A. So Bruno, this year's theme is land restoration, drought resilience, and fighting desertification. What are some of the initiatives that you have seen throughout your work that are taking great steps in advancing all these different agendas and the theme of today's World Environment Day?
Thanks. And it's difficult to make choices to highlight one or two, but I think I've seen there's one of the recipients of the flagship that we actually honored recently during the UN Environment Assembly in Nairobi. It was in February, and it's an initiative that is led by Trees of the Future, and they assist farmers on the continent in transforming the food systems. And I was mentioning earlier in my previous intervention how much food systems is a driver of land degradation, of unhealthy soil. So for me, acting on this is so crucial. And what this project does is they share the methods to restore, to produce, respecting the use of soil, and basically build best practices for regenerative agroforestry. And they've got an approach which is called the forest garden. So farmers, smallholder farmers, usually a lot of, I must say, also women farmers, are trained and then go into this incredible pattern of planting seeds and growing trees of many different kinds, but interlinking that with food crops and resource crops, so that basically we restore small, one half hectare by 1/2 hectare, we get this incredible forest garden approach. And it's really working. It's very impressive when you see the result 4 years before, 4 years after, which means that, yeah, it does work, and it does bring the community together on restoring land. The other example I'd like to take is what we also support in Central America in the dry corridor, which is the corridor that goes across Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. It's a place on our planet where there are long periods of drought, which are then alternated with periods of heavy rainfall. But if the soil is not good, if the soil is degraded, then you get the effect of the drought. You don't get the benefits of the rainfall. And so we've been also supporting there the restoration of land, turbocharging really the restoration by getting communities involved and sharing the knowledge on how you do this, on how you get climate smart practices of restoration shared with communities. And so basically leave the cover crops on the soil, planting trees uphill so that the soil is retained and regenerates beautifully. And this is really impacting the lives of many. I mean, there are 10 million inhabitants in this corridor, and I think it's making a difference. And it's one of the things where we was asked in the chat, what can we all do? This is where you can create a movement from starting demonstrating it works and getting then 10 million people to adhere to it and benefit from it. So let's do it. And it doesn't take 20 years. You can do it in 4 or 5 years, actually. So let's do it.
Completely agree. And what a great end to the panel. We're all joining you and working together to actually do it. And I would like to, just before we move to the movie screening, because I'm sure all of you are excited for that, we have 2 questions. And I would like to invite and see the questions from both Tim Webb and Priyanshi Shukla. If you would like to raise your hand and ask the question yourself, that would be amazing. But you would need to raise your hand first, if it's possible. If not, I can read your question. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, Tim, can we let Tim in, ask his question? Yeah. Tim, you have the floor.
It doesn't look like he can unmute himself.
Yeah, I can see that. Is it possible? Yeah, the mic is not enabled. We would have really loved to hear from you, and I think...
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Perfect.
Excellent. Thanks very much. First of all, thank you to all the panelists. It's been fascinating following all of this. My question was really, what are the top 3 actions each of you would like to see everybody undertake?
Yeah, amazing. Thank you, Tim. And we already have Finian ready with his 3 actions. I think I can just read the next question and then give you back the response. I think we just received another very interesting question. And it's related to Tim's question, is that what can we do at an individual level for land restoration? So if you can also emphasize that or tell us from the 3 key actions you have in response to Tim's question. So Finian, over to you.
Again, awesome, great question, Tim. Yeah, I think there's so many options, but what I would start with is sharing and just remembering that this idea is not nearly at the tipping point yet. And so sharing, Kiss the Ground material, media, if you go there, you can find a lot of it on our website, or just going on YouTube and finding so many incredible land restoration projects to share. This starts to change the human conversation. We're stuck in how do we save ourselves by sustaining it? We're too broken. We can't sustain anymore. We have to regenerate. We have to restore. So you can be the access for people to get that. Join, build, and support. What I mean by that is get involved with something that's happening now. Start your own project, get going, get activated. And the third one would be to learn and remember that I wasn't a soil advocate. Probably most of us here didn't start this way, but we need a multitude of people. We need millions of people with different skill sets to say, this is my number one priority. I'm going to help push this forward. And I promise, because this is the next wave, you will find a place to contribute your skills. I wasn't a scientist. I wasn't a farmer. I wasn't an indigenous knowledge holder. I was an activator, musician person. And that's what I brought. I brought a different mindset to this idea. And all of us are needed in this. So that's why I'm saying the course Kiss the Ground Soil Advocate Training, we have a new one coming that's even shorter called Essentials of Regenerative Agriculture Essentials. These are things that can help you catapult into this movement and not take 7 years to become an adequate advocate. So that's what I'm saying to people is we need you desperately to jump in, start learning, own that you're a part of this movement because you are, and the movement needs you now.
Amazing, thank you. Anyone else from the panelists would like to respond to this question? Yes, Bruno?
I just can't help but I think I would have said it the same, and also add, Finian, that make the link between the three planetary crises, because soil is that binder between them. My chemicals were mentioned earlier, and a lot in the chat about chemical pollution of soil, and of course climate change will make the soil degradation even worse, and then we lose biodiversity. So the soil is really the binder between the three crises. So in your advocacy, in your thinking, that systemic vision, soil brings it together, and that's when we really get the change that we want when we bring these three things together.
Thank you, Bruno. Ayati?
Yeah, thank you. I think a lot of my ideas, again, what we share has been obviously covered by a previous panelist, but I also wanted to add a little bit more. Starting first with obviously boycott. I think the first thing that I learned in my journey was not that it's the young or the disproportionate impact or that a singular individual is responsible for a burden of the climate crisis, but that at my time, it was about 100 or so companies that were responsible. Now it's only 50 or so. That's, again, majority, more than 80% of the emissions that they're accounting for. So I would, again, like to emphasize on what we've been talking about in terms of systemic change, that if you want to, again, accelerate what you're doing already, I would really, really encourage everybody to rethink, again, see the world from different perspectives, whether it be the current genocide that's happening, whether the government that you've been working for or living in, or again, just looking at it from the lenses of the people that were actually suffering, because in the end, it's again a humanitarian crisis. And then finally, also adding on to the whole idea that we are all connected, and that's majorly through soil, would also again like to say that what you need to do as a person is not burden yourself more. I think that's what we've been also talking about, a lot of eco-anxiety that has been happening in at least our generation. And again, through intergenerational dialogues, we've seen this a lot, that all you essentially need to do is support the movements that are actually already there. You need to see yourself, as we've all been saying, as part of the system, as part of the solution, because you're already halfway there. And again, finally, to rebuild those connections, going back to wherever you feel the most spiritual at. It could be water, it could be little lakes, it could be again the forest, anything that helps you reconnect again. These were the three things that come to my mind.
Thank you so much for emphasizing that. And it's so important, as you said, the power of the people when we fight all the different stakeholders. So thank you. Now I would love to invite our last question before we have to run for the screaming. Harriet, would you like to please unmute so that we can invite you to share your question with us.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Clearly.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for this amazing, transforming panel. I just wanted to understand. I'm a bit started maybe responding to the same question that I asked, but I just want to hear from the panelists what they think in the course of all these adaptation plans that are put in place by all these institutions. That how do we get back to supporting regeneration so that the soil heals in the course of all this adaptation plans and all these actions that governments are putting in place to support climate change movements and whatnot. I hope I'm clear.
Yeah, thank you so much, Harriet. Anyone would like to take that question? Yeah, please go ahead, Adi. No?
Sorry, I saw Phineas unmute, so I stopped. Okay, maybe I can just say a few thoughts. What we've been essentially listening for from the negotiators as well as a few countries, majorly the SIDS, the LDCs, as you all know. We've been majorly talking about, for example, there was also a question I saw in the chat previously about how do you measure restoration. The whole problem hinges on the fact that we need to first protect, conserve, and then we can talk about restoration. So the more we talked about adaptation, it always went back to the amount of new oil and gas projects, for example, the amount of, again, how the economy is not changing, how the system is not changing, and we still on an overconsumption consumption pattern. I think that's what's missing for a lot of NAPs, as well as finally coming back again to what we hinted before on the adaptation implementation side, as well as the mechanisms. It's not getting to more technical stuff, but also what, again, the UN decade, as well as our partners and FAO, for example, the technical mechanisms, etc., has been working on, is the final implementation of it. You see a lot of plans. There have been a lot of different ideas. Even the adaptation plan that was made back in 1994 has to be updated, and the IPCC also declared that we're working on it as working group 2 and 3. But what we're still missing on is the capacity of the people on ground. For example, what Karthik mentioned was the farmers who still don't have access either to those techniques, or the soil is not capable enough, or again, this all comes back down to these small local actors. And I know Finian would again describe more on this, so I'll stop here.
Yeah, thank you so much. And all these different mechanisms are so important because they bring countries together to actually commit and prioritize. And as you said, we cannot just focus on restoration and not look back at what are the activities that are leading to degradation and destruction, and how can we do both at the same time without overlooking the other aspects. So very valuable. And Finian, over to you.
Yeah, I think I understood the question, but maybe I missed it a little bit. But I think the biggest thing in these scenarios is that we have to adjust the conversation. And I think we're relating way too much to certain regions of the world and still taking cues from, let's just call it out, England, for example, or northeastern United States. A lot of places that don't see the impact and the reality of land degradation at the pace it is. England's one of the most forgivable places on the planet. You can till and leave bare ground all you want, and it recovers because it's drizzling and cloudy all the time. If you do the same actions in Australia or even in New Mexico, it turns to a desert and it doesn't come back. It keeps degenerating and desertifying. So we have to take context into account, and then we have to say, why are we paying so much attention to these gizmos and gadgets and technology when we have real problems? And the number one real problem in the world is desertification and the lack of water. Water is life, period. If we don't regenerate land so that water systems function again, it doesn't matter how much technology we have. We're basically, my analogy I give to people is, look, we have billions of dollars being spent to get water out of a shattered cup. The soil is the cup. It's designed to hold water and retain water and infiltrate water. We broke the cup. It's now in a billion pieces, and we're spending billions of dollars with little technology to get the little water out of the teeny pieces of the cup. We can rebuild the cup. We can glue it back together. And ironically, the glue that we need is carbon in our atmosphere right now. Literally, we can rebuild the cup so it functions again, but we're having way too much time spent talking about these things that are going to make some people somewhere a lot of money and a lot of tech people happy, but real people in real places all over the world. I want to give a shout out to some of the places in India where they are transforming entire desertified areas back into water systems that function. Land is absorbing, retaining, and infiltrating water, and we're having springs and aquifers recharge very quickly. This can happen. We have to change the conversation of the governments. It's just ridiculous that these tech billionaires and these companies are saying, oh, this is what we need. It's like, no, we have people in real life. We can transform the lives of the most impoverished, the most hurting, and those are our farming communities. That's where the majority of our food even comes from. We can transform them, get them off of the chemical addiction so they're not committing suicide, not having to pay the big companies a bunch of money every year. This is sovereignty. This is water sovereignty, human health. This is ecosystem restoration. All of it's happening. Look at Google Earth tonight, everyone. Go home. Look at all the land that's in farming right now. It's massive. Every part of the world is somehow farmed. Humans have to change our relationship much more in line with a lot of indigenous practices to be stewards and regenerate. We can, and it makes farmers more money. Who loses? The chemical ag companies. That's about it. Everyone else wins. So we really have to take this to the bottom, to what is going to serve the greatest amount of people with the least amount of money, and it's land regeneration and restoration at scale. That's the fastest, best solution. And again, I said in the chat here, carbon in the atmosphere is a huge problem. We have to stop doing it. We have to stop putting so much up. But the far greater problem is broken land. And the great news is if we rebuild the land, we do sequester the carbon that's in the atmosphere too. So that's it for me, but enjoy the movie. I hope you love it.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. And this is a great intro to the movie. So we are going to start now. I'm just going to call on the UNEP team. Okay, amazing.
Planet Earth, home to a growing number of Homo sapiens and a whole lot of other creatures. It's a great place to live. But when it comes to the future of our small planet,
now to a dire warning about climate change.
Natural disasters like hurricanes or wildfires, and unprecedented decline in nature threatening humanity.
6th mass extinction event is already well. There's so much bad news about our planet, it's so overwhelming. The fear that we're headed for a cliff puts most of us into a state of paralysis. The truth is, I've given up. And the odds are, so have you.
What are things that you're doing in your life to make an impact around climate change?
I mean, I like to, do my part when I can, like with my metal straw.
Going to the paper straws.
No plastic straws. Paper straws versus plastic.
Recycled straws. Every time I come here, I feel energized.
If recycling and paper straws are our only hope, we are in really big trouble. But what if there was another path? This is the story of a simple solution, a way to heal our planet and keep our species off the extinction list. In fact, the solution I'm talking about is right under our feet. And it's as old as dirt. We call it soil, earth, or ground. And due to its vast scale and its ability to sequester immense quantities of greenhouse gases, it could just be the one thing that can balance our climate, replenish our freshwater supplies, and feed the world. That's why some people are racing to save our soil, in hopes our soil just might save us.
I am a conservation agronomist. We get the soil right, we can fix a lot of our issues. Healthy soils lead to a healthy plant, healthy animal, healthy human, healthy water, healthy climate. This is what this is about today. Learning how the soil works and learning how to farm like nature does.
The message is simple, but getting that message out is difficult.
We have a social problem. We have an education issue. And until we get that right, we can't fix our ecological issues. I have been in NRCS for 31 years. It was kind of amazing to me as I was teaching all over the country. I'm going, wow, our producers don't really know how the soil works. They don't understand the basic ecological principles. Everything runs by carbon. We're built by carbon. The soil microbes run by carbon. Carbon is the driving engine. It runs the system.
But when it comes to the role of carbon in our world, there's a bit of confusion.
What is carbon dioxide?
It's comes from
That's a trick question for me. You caught me off guard on that.
I guess that would be carbon and two molecules of whatever.
Something bad?
It's poison that you're breathing, and it will destroy you.
To be specific, carbon dioxide is a gas. We breathe it out, and plants breathe it in. We also make carbon dioxide by burning fossil fuels. But carbon isn't bad. In fact, it's the basis for all life on Earth.
There's a tendency right now for us to be at war with carbon. Carbon's the bad guy, and I think this is a lost opportunity. Carbon's the good guy. We're carbon. I'm 16% carbon, and all of it came from eating vegetation and things that eat vegetation.
Plants use sunlight as energy, and they pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. They turn it into a carbon fuel, and that's how they grow. But 40% of that carbon fuel, they send down to their roots. They're leaking it out in a very strategic way to soil microorganisms. Plants are feeding soil microorganisms carbon, and the soil microorganisms are bringing plants mineral nutrients. And in the process of all that, those soil microorganisms make a carbon glue out of that carbon fuel. And they make habitat in the soil. They make little pockets in the soil to control the flow of air and water. And that's one of the ways that carbon gets fixed in the soil.
In other words, soil has the unique ability to sequester carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. That's a big deal. And what's even more amazing? The soil contains an entire universe of life.
Here I went to years of college, and I took soil science. I didn't know. I really did not know how the soil worked. It's alive.
In every handful of healthy soil, there are more organisms than the number of people who've ever lived on planet Earth.
I believe in miracles. Where you from? You sexy thing, you.
And those organisms are processing organic matter that's in the soil and putting the nutrients into a form that the plant needs. Comparing the soil microbial diversity to the microbial diversity that we're now seeing inside the human organism. you have more bacterial cells in your body than you have human cells.
Yeah, we're about 1% human and 99% microbes. It's the truth.
The food that we eat, we actually chew and break that food material down into little bits that get eaten by the bacteria in our gut. When you eat kale, let's say, when you're eating kale, your body doesn't consume kale. The bacteria consume the kale. And you feed off of what the bacteria have processed and released by the consumption of that kale.
The key to health is eating dirt. And what I mean by that is we need to eat what's in the dirt that's transferred to the plants that then we eat and create health.
Taking care of the microbes in the soil is critical for human health. But spraying the soil with toxic chemicals, well, does something else.
All of our soils that are under chemical conventional agriculture are almost completely devoid of microorganisms.
Spraying the soil with toxic chemicals kills the very microbes we need to give us health and pull the carbon from the atmosphere. The more tilling that's done, the weaker the soil gets, and the more farmers feel compelled to use chemical sprays. This is the vicious cycle of industrial agriculture.
It takes more nitrogen now to raise a bushel of grain than it did in 1960.
Our chemical fertilizers mask the problem of degraded soils. Modern agriculture was not designed for the betterment of the soil.
Today, our most common crops are genetically altered to resist the spraying of toxic pesticides. For example, the #1 crop in the United States, field corn, is almost entirely sprayed with glyphosate, a chemical suspected to cause cancer that's so oversprayed, it's found its way into our drinking water.
These chemicals, which were considered dangerous to begin with, are now being used at rates that would have been inconceivable 20 years ago.
Every year, for every American alive, 3 pounds of toxic chemicals are sprayed onto the food grown on our farms.
That goes into the soil, it goes into the water, it goes into our bodies. It's not just on the food you eat, it's everywhere.
Most of the agricultural industry's pesticides and herbicides transfer directly through breast milk to babies. There are over 200 peer-reviewed studies that correlate the spraying of these toxic chemicals to effects like ADD in children, pediatric cancers, and birth defects. That's why juries have begun to award billions of dollars in damages to people who contracted cancer after using glyphosate.
We know, for example, that glyphosate, which is also known as Roundup, has an effect on the gut microbiome that may lead to disturbances that can create disease, including cancer.
A big reason these chemicals make us sick is because just as toxic chemicals kill the microbes in the soil, they also kill the microbes in our bodies.
What I tell people is your body can handle acute stresses, but it cannot handle chronic stresses. Soil ecosystems the same way. If you keep dumping the fungicides, you keep dumping the herbicides, you keep dumping the insecticides, you keep doing the tillage, chronic stress, it doesn't function anymore.
Since chemical agriculture ramped up worldwide in the 1970s, we have lost 1/3 of the Earth's topsoil. But industrial agriculture isn't just harming our soils, it's also affecting something much larger.
The most massive tsunami, perfect storm is bearing down upon us. But fossil fuels, carbon, coal, and gas, are by no means the only thing that is causing climate change. Now, because the fate of water and carbon are tied to soil organic matter, when we damage soils, you give off carbon. Carbon goes back to the atmosphere.
Healthy soils absorb water and carbon dioxide. But when we destroy soil, it releases water and carbon dioxide. This dries out the soil and turns it into dust. The process is called desertification. And how we deal with it could determine the fate of more than just our climate.
Desertification is a fancy word for land that is turning to desert. And this happens only when we create too much bare ground.
Soil and the plant and the climate are connected. If you don't have a living plant, you're going to have more evaporation. What we want is transpiration. When the moisture leaves through the plant, when it does that, it increases humidity, and when it increases the humidity, we have more rain. 60% of our rainfall comes from the ocean. But a lot of people don't realize 40% comes from small water cycles where our rain comes from inland. What's going on is we disrupted the small water cycles. That's when you have too much sensible heat coming off bare soil. You're having these huge vortexes of hot air going out. Instead of attracting the rain, it's pushing the rain clouds away.
Take 1 square meter of soil and make it bare, and I promise you, you will find it much colder at dawn and much hotter at midday than that same piece of ground if it's just covered with plant litter. You have changed the microclimate. Now, by the time you are doing that on more than half the world's land, you are changing macroclimate.
According to the United Nations, the world's remaining topsoil will be gone within 60 years. In other words, unless we find a way to save our soils, we have 60 harvests left.
Let's do that. Do a couple of demos.
The global scale of the problems we face may seem insurmountable. But in every fight that seems unwinnable, there are those who refuse to give up.
We're very fortunate to have Ray Archuleta with us today. Ray, as you can tell, is someone that has quite a bit of notoriety. He's got his own reality show. Now that doesn't happen. With that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Ray. And Ray, we appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. Ray.
This is a supercomputer model by NASA. We're concerned of the red and purples being CO2. I want you to notice the dates. That is February, March. Now, what are we doing March, April? What do we do in modern agriculture in April? We are tilling. We're tilling the land. And look at the huge plumes of CO2. Look at the dates. May. Now, let's see what happens around June. Look at the colors change. Ladies and gentlemen, what is happening in June? You see how powerful the living plants are? Can you imagine if we had all our rangeland and all our cropland covered? A covered planet is a healthy planet.
First seasoned environmentalist and the editor of Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. Please welcome Paul Hawken. Tell us why your plan is different and why it is the most comprehensive.
Well, it's very different because it's the first one ever. You cannot achieve drawdown without biosequestration. Biosequestration is using plants, trees, perennials, and techniques of grazing and farming to capture carbon and store it in the sink of the soil and retain it for decades, if not centuries. What we did is map, measured, and modeled the 100 most substantive solutions to global warming. And what I mean by solutions, I mean things that are at hand. We know how to do it. They're scaling. And if we continue to scale in a rigorous but reasonable way over 30 years, we can reverse global warming.
When you talk to people about this great technology that has existed for millions of years that takes carbon out of the atmosphere and stores it safely in the soil, and that it's called plants working with soil microorganisms, it seems too simple.
If we are going to succeed in balancing our climate, we do need to switch to renewable energies. But none of that will alter the tremendous amount of carbon we've already put into the atmosphere. Since 1750, when the Industrial Revolution began, we've pumped about 1,000 billion tons, also known as gigatons, of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. It's called our legacy load of carbon. And even if we stopped all greenhouse gas emissions today, that legacy load of carbon will still be there.
That legacy load of carbon dioxide is still going to be warming the atmosphere for decades, if not centuries. So if all we talk about is reducing emissions, it's not enough.
If electric cars and solar panels aren't enough, then what is the solution?
The only goal that makes sense for humanity is drawdown, a year-to-year reduction in carbon in the upper atmosphere. Anything else is climate chaos. If we want to achieve drawdown, we have to go thank the earth and start to farm and grow our plants and trees in an entirely different way. Once you achieve drawdown, within 20 years, you have cooling. You have the beginning of cooling. So now we have a horizon that if you're 20, 30 years old, you can say, in my lifetime, we can achieve this.
In other words, the very practices that heal our soils will also heal our climate. To stabilize the Earth's climate, we can use the most powerful carbon capture technologies: the photosynthesis of plants and the microorganisms in the soil. And the one type of farming that does this the best and draws down the most carbon is based on the concept of regeneration, which simply means to repair the damage we've done and make things better.
So we are sitting in a food forest. This is agroforestry. It's agriculture through trees, tree diversification. I've got an avocado tree, banana tree, fig tree, coffee trees. And put my hands in we went from a monocrop of single Haas avocado to now having about 40 different fruit varieties on site. Cause my home is where my food is grown. I'm going back to the earth. By diversifying, we can now have harvests every month. If you're looking to do something that would greatly impact Mother Earth, plant a tree. You don't need acres and acres and acres to build a food forest. You really just need a few hundred square feet. You're going to look outside one day and go, what is something we buy every day at the grocery store that instead of waiting for it to be shipped around the world to me, what can I put in my own backyard that I can do myself? And to truly be forgiven, we must all get back to living with the land in harmony. I'm going back to the earth. I'm going back.
Regenerative agriculture grows more food per acre. It's scalable to our entire agricultural system, and what's more, it's already being done right now, today.
So I'm taking it to a field here that is a multi-species cover crop. The purpose of a cover crop is to enhance the life and the function of the soil. Think of it this way, if I'd grow a monoculture on this field, we'd only be feeding the soil biology one type of root exogen. I'm growing 19 species here. We're accelerating biological time. We're feeding the soil biology what it would take a conventional farmer 19 years to do. I'm doing it in 1 year. So people might ask, how do you get any money from this thing? Our livestock will graze this during the winter, speeding up the process of regenerating those soils. Animals grazing living plants are a part of the carbon cycle. Here in the northern plains, our soils were formed by large herds of bison and elk being moved by predators, grazing a landscape, trampling that carbon, the plants onto the soil surface, not coming back for maybe a year, allowing full recovery.
It wasn't that long ago that over 60 million buffalo roamed the continent, and the people who lived here for millennia knew exactly how to coexist with those animals.
My name is Charging Eagle of the Oglala Lakota of the Seven Council Fires. There was this story of Creator Takasha telling our people to follow the buffalo, and the buffalo will show you where your lands are. This whole area, this whole region belonged to our people, the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota Nation. My ancestors, they lived in a period of time when everything came from nature. You can actually drink from the rivers, eat what was caught in the rivers, gather berries. Everything was a part of this bigger circle. And the buffalo meant the world. The buffalo meant everything to us. We became the buffalo. We were known as the Buffalo Nation. We didn't see ourselves as above animals or below animals. We were just right there with them. And they took care of us. We became a part of that bigger system.
In an attempt to starve the Native Americans, the U.S. military and the railroads killed most of the buffalo. By the time the culling ended, only a few thousand of the majestic animals remained.
When you become a part of what I call the accumulation culture, when you live in that culture, you're going to lose track of what it means to be a part of something else. Because when you start to accumulate, you tend to forget what is important and you become separate. The more you become separate, the unhappier you're going to become because you're going to want more and more and more. Accumulation is like an addiction. It's part of this illness, this addiction that prevents us from being sustainable with nature. I mean, being thankful for this earth, for this piece of ground that we have. We have to look at all of these things, the global warming, the loss of drinking water, all of these negative things happening, the violence, the war. All of that is all rooted in that accumulation cultural mindset. We have to be able to let some of that go now. We have to say, okay, we've done enough. Enough's enough. That's where we're at right now, and it can be done.
Recent studies show that when cows are kept on pasture and constantly moved, like the buffalo, they not only help sequester carbon, they help rebuild entire ecosystems. That's regeneration. A new breed of farmers and ranchers are using hooved animals to restore damaged land.
I was raised in a rural area in Washington, adopted by a Lakota elder. We were out in nature every day. I found permaculture, and that was very influential in my life, where I could see that there could be a permanent agriculture, an agriculture that not only fed the planet, but also fed the people in a way that regenerated and didn't deplete resources.
Holistic ranchers like the market guards use careful planning so their cows sequester carbon and actually regenerate the land.
Cows can be good. That is one of the most controversial statements of mankind at this point. Using cattle, allowing them to roam and graze and planned grazing can literally revive enough space to create a tremendous amount of drawdown. I'm from Southeast Louisiana. I grew up in an incredibly delicate ecosystem. Conservation was always a very serious part of my life. I had no idea that the earth was desertified. I got on a plane from New York City to fly to Zimbabwe to meet Alan Savory. So he could show us the difference between desertification and regeneration. Land that has been holistically managed through planned grazing using cattle, the most vilified animal in the world. We are in Africa right now, driving through a field that has been under Alan Savory's holistic management for 9 years, and it is in Eden. This is what you call high grass.
Using livestock to reverse desertification is totally scalable to about 2/3 of the world's land, and nothing else is. And frankly, that can be done at extremely low cost.
Here we are. This is what it should be like. You've been working on this land for 8 or 9 years. It went from a place of turning into a total desert and using hooved herding herbivores. You have literally transformed that, what we've been seeing, into this. How in the hell do you make this happen?
So none the urine and the hooves hooves of the animals are what caused this grass to grow. That livestock is never on more than a hectare of this land, about 2.5 acres, never more than 3 days.
Right.
And they're never back on that piece of land under about 6 to 9 months.
Wow.
So no plant can get overgrazed. You can come any day of the year, anywhere on this land, and you will see no livestock, because they will be on less than 1 hectare of land. Unless we take you there, you won't even know it.
Dealing with this beast of climate change, a lot of people don't understand that this helps climate change. This sequesters carbon. This takes the one thing that we so desperately need out of the air, and it holds it, and it makes oxygen.
Yeah, if we can produce solid grassland, you can pull down enormous amounts of carbon back into the soil. 2/3 of the world, roughly, is grasslands and savannas where the rainfall is too low to support a solid canopy of trees giving you soil cover. So grass is essentially what has to stabilize that soil.
You look at this and you realize this is what the world should look like. This is what Africa should look like. This is what South and Central America should look like. This is what Texas should look like. This is how we win. We can get the earth back to the Garden of Eden that it once was by regeneration.
When used smartly, herbivores can pull down carbon and reverse desertification. But it doesn't just work for Africa. It works everywhere in the world.
The form of agriculture that we use creates billions of lives in the form of soil microbes, in nematodes, in grassland birds. All of that wildlife is flourishing under an agriculture system versus a tilled crop field, which is denuded of life.
The odds are there are some things that you can do to save our soils today.
Compost is the natural decomposition of organic matter in nature. In a forest floor, it's when the leaves drop, the fungi and bacteria take it over and literally build the soil at the root zone. Compost is all about community. From the community of microbes that are breaking down the pile to the community of individuals in Los Angeles that are physically turning and sifting and contributing to that pile.
Everyone is connected to the soil. Everybody is connected to the soil, no matter who you are, what color, male, female, it doesn't matter where you come from. We're all connected to the soil. And for me, I'm concerned about that 1 inch, right? That takes years to develop 1 inch of soil. I collect food scraps from restaurants, manure from zoos, manure. Do you know why? To keep this stuff out of landfills and use it to make good, rich dirt. That's why. How do we take waste and repurpose and reuse it, because it's really not waste?
There are continents and other really large regions that are getting hit with a double whammy of higher temperatures and drought. This kills soil. It kills life. One of the solutions to that challenge is to collect the food scraps from cities like San Francisco, turn them into compost, and get it onto local farms, and that helps them retain water because compost is a natural sponge. The unfortunate reality is most trash or garbage gets incinerated or sent to a landfill. We collect our food scraps, we put them in the green bin, it goes off to Recology's compost facility, we turn it into compost and it gets on a farm. That's a simple solution.
Compost is just one of a suite of soil-based carbon capture solutions. The more we choose regenerative foods, the more the farmers will grow them.
We're at a critical moment in human history. There could be a way to eat food that heals the planet. The way we're articulating it is the regenerative diet. If we do eat meat, we need to eat meat that comes from pasture-raised, grass-fed, humanely killed animals.
This is the most crucial choice all of us can make for the future of the planet. What are we eating? What kind of farming systems are we supporting? Are we regenerating the earth or are we degenerating?
If you look over here, we have my neighbor's land that has been chemical fallowed. It has had nothing growing on it for over a year, except for the few Roundup-resistant weeds that are on here. It's an ecological desert. Then you look over at our paddocks. You have a diversity of different plant species. You have insects, you have wildlife, plus the livestock grazing on it. We're capturing sunlight from early in the spring till late in the fall, converting that sunlight into liquid carbon to drive and fuel the system. There you have soil. Over on this side, you have dirt. Where do you want your food to come from? Which model do you want your food to be produced from? The answer is pretty simple to me.
All over our planet, people are using the practices of regeneration to heal the land and balance the climate. Some of these projects are big.
We know that about 25% of the world's land mass has been degraded by human beings over historical time. When we look at the cradles of civilization, Greece and Rome, we find that many of these places have turned into deserts. The sand is blowing across the ruins of once great civilizations. The List Plateau, the cradle of Chinese civilization, was the place where settled agriculture first began. When I was asked to film the baseline study in the List Plateau, I found myself alone, standing on a mountaintop, and I could look in 360 degrees and there was no vegetation. This was fundamentally ecologically destroyed. It was called the most eroded place filled with miserably poor people. So I felt that I had to spend the rest of my life dealing with this. It was hard to imagine at that time that you could restore that. So from about 1994 till 2009, 14 years, an area of 35,000 square kilometers, approximately the size of Belgium. They had the top Chinese scientists, they had international scientists from the World Bank supporting them. They created mapping systems with satellites so that every watershed had a unique address. The results were stunning. Hundreds of millions of people were lifted out of poverty. We met people who were illiterate, and their children now go to the top universities in the country. Human beings emerged in paradise. If we restore all the degraded land on the earth, we can return to paradise. If we start now to build a restoration economy, a regeneration economy, this is the way forward. to see a stream return and flow, to bring back fertile soils, to see biodiversity return to a place that was completely devastated. This is where everyone can find tremendous satisfaction.
When I look into your eyes, it's like watching the night sky, or a beautiful sunrise. Oh, there's so much they hold.
So let's restore a little bit of paradise every day. It's not that difficult. If we stop distracting ourselves with shiny objects and we start to think about what's really important to us, to see biodiversity return to a place that was completely devastated. This is where everyone can find tremendous satisfaction and the meaning of our lives.
We're all in this together. Every action that we take affects every other action, like a ripple in the pond. So what decision are you going to make that will make a positive impact on this beautiful planet so that our great-grandchildren, 7 generations in the future, can actually go up and hug an old-growth redwood tree and swim in clean waters and be able to open their mouths and drink while they're swimming? And what is it that we can do today so that our children can flourish in the abundance that we've created by our decisions?
When you are at your best in the world, a lot of the times you're feeling your best in nature. You're at your best in nature, and there's something there. There's something ancient there. The wisdom of that, it's sacred. It's one path to being happy in the world.
It's not about religion. It's not about politics. It's about love. And if you love something or you love somebody, you want to understand them and you want to take care of them and protect them and keep them safe. And that's what we're all here to do. Even like the little mycorrhizal fungi and the worms and the bacteria. And if we take care of them, they'll take care of us.
From the smallest microbes to the largest creatures, our blue planet pulses with life. For millions of years, it has self-healed and self-balanced. But today, our species faces its biggest test. Our mission is simple. We must harness the regenerative power of Earth itself. I'll make you a deal. I won't give up. And neither should you.
Even the stars, they burn. Some even fall to the earth. We got a lot to learn. God knows we're worth it. No, I won't give up. I don't want to be someone who walks away so easily. I'm here to stay and make the difference that I can make. I won't give up on us, even if the skies get rough. I'm giving you all my love. I'm still looking up.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you for your attention to such a great movie. I personally learned so much from the incredible work, as well as the amazing solution and how groundbreaking it is, as Finian said, the importance of regeneration and restoration. So thank you all for your attention, for taking the time to join us for the World Environment Day all over the world. And we encourage you to please engage with UNEP's channels, with each other. Let's continue the conversation for generation restoration. You have seen how this incredible demonstration in Kiss the Ground of how we can play a role in restoring the soil, restoring our planet and our land on which our health depends on. And we want to share what we have learned today and highly encourage you to keep continuing being engaged as you are. And thank you so much.